The sudden loss of a child is absolutely devastating to any parents, but today I get to meet a wonderful woman who's turned her grief into hope for some of Russia's most vulnerable, lost and neglected orphans. For 45-year-old Sarah Settelen, the plight of disabled children has always been one close to her heart after giving birth to her daughter Ellie, who was born with severe cerebral palsy.
She had spastic quadriplegia, so it was throughout her whole body. So she had no voluntary muscle movement at all. We were never quite sure how much Ellie could see, but she certainly never responded visually to anything. She had constant epileptic activity going on in her brain, which meant she would found it really hard to learn anything.
In January 2000, Ellie was rushed to hospital with a flu virus that led to pneumonia, and she tragically died 5 hours later. She was just 4 years old.
When Ellie died, it was utterly unexpected. It took me a long time to come to terms with it and come to accept the fact that I had to live with it and had to move on.
During Ellie's infancy, Sarah was introduced to a unique form of therapy called portage. This was developed in the early 1970s as a home visiting service for preschool children with special needs. It teaches basic skills by breaking them down into tiny steps, which means children with learning difficulties can pick up tasks more easily. Sarah had been so impressed by this method that after Ellie's death, she decided to learn the techniques herself.
It was the most astonishing process to be involved with. It was incredibly empowering. I could see what an incredibly valuable tool and service it was. When Ellie was alive, somebody gave me an article from the newspaper about a child not dissimilar to Ellie who lived in a Russian orphanage, and on reading the article it was clear that this child's life was spent within the confines of a cot and nobody ever picked her up or held her in any way. And it made an incredibly strong impact on me. When Ellie died, the article kept coming back to haunt me really, and it was very difficult to let it go, and I sort of knew that I had to deal with it and do something about it before my life took me off in another direction.
So in May 2002, she travelled to Ryazan outside Moscow for a 2-month placement volunteering in a children's home, where there were nearly 150 children between the age of newborn to 4 years old, and over 1/3 of these were disabled.
The more that I learnt about the Russian orphanage system, the more horrified I became really, because the institutional system don't have enough staff to care for these children on a one-to-one basis. So these children had no sense of identity. They weren't important to anybody. They weren't the centre of anybody's universe anywhere.
So you're going to show me some footage now of the orphanage?
Yes, some of this footage was taken in the older orphanage for kids with disabilities, and we've been working there now for over a year, and I'm going to show you some of the children that we've been working with. So this little girl here on the left is called Ksusha, and she's 7 years old.
What's she doing?
Well, this is the most severest form of self-stimulation I've ever seen in any child, and she's trying to get feedback from her body. I mean, all the children rock or do something, they bite their arms or they do something to get some kind of response from the world around them. That's what she does when she's in her cot, and it is very... I know, it is shocking, it's deeply shocking. Now this is her a year on. This is Maria just guiding her hand, but actually she didn't really need to be doing this. And this is her walking. Yeah. And she's so enthusiastic and so...
that is amazing.
Yeah, she's really just
You wouldn't
blossomed.
believe that's the same child rocking in that cot, would you?
No, you wouldn't. She's completely transformed.
It was during this first trip that Sarah encountered Natasha, a 3-year-old girl with cerebral palsy who lived at the home.
I first met Natasha on my second day in the orphanage. She just looked deep into my eyes and grinned this most astonishing, open smile. It was a real moment where she was saying, "It's me, look at me. I want you to want me." And that was the start of it, really.
By the end of her first visit, Sarah knew she wanted to adopt Natasha, and by the end of May 2003, the adoption process had been finalised, and Natasha came to England and became part of the family.
She had never had any therapy or education or any input of any kind. So she was unable to walk. So the first thing we did was her physiotherapist got her a walking frame, and she learnt how to use a walking frame, and she now walks with sticks as well. So has done incredibly well on the physical mobility point of view. She goes to a mainstream school, she's reading and writing and doing all the sorts of things that she should do, and basically has an incredibly active, vibrant, energetic, fun life.
Why I don't look like a scarecrow? I'm not a puppet.
When we came home with Natasha, obviously I was very intent on focusing all my attentions on her. But at the same time, I had to put into action this idea and this vision that I'd had when I was out there as to how I could help the other disabled children that Natasha had left behind.
It was at this point that Sarah masterminded her charity, The Promise, by initially raising the £40,000 necessary to train 6 local Russian women in portage therapy.
It was after a couple of months into the 6-month pilot project that we started getting really positive feedback from members of staff and Tatiana, the orphanage director, who weren't directly involved in the work, and they were just astounded at the progress these children were making.
Портаж коренным образом изменил работу дома ребенка, поэтому на сегодняшний день я просто даже не представляю, как мы можем дальше развиваться и жить с нашими детьми, если у нас не будет применяться эта воспитательная программа.
5 years on, the charity now supports over 14 therapists in 2 orphanages in the region, and another team that works with families with disabled children in their own homes in the community.
On my first trip back to the baby home, once Portage had been operating there for about 6 months, I found it incredibly overwhelming because it was so clear to me that these children had utterly transformed, and some of the children I hardly recognised actually, they'd changed so much. I felt so honoured somehow that a way had been found to continue the legacy that Ellie had left.
Now, we think you're a Wonder Woman. How does it feel to be a Wonder Woman?
I wouldn't see myself as a Wonder Woman at all. Once you have an idea and you know that you have a potential solution to something, you can't walk away from that.
They say charity begins at home, and Sarah has more than proved that. But she's also shown us that from home you can reach out to help those who can't help themselves, and also teach people to see all children through the eyes of a loving parent.